You're watching the Recharge Your Life video series, and I'm your host, Phaedra Antioco, pain and trauma specialist. Oftentimes I see that there are these traumatic events that stream in our lives and can get trapped in our body. And joining me today is Sue Hitzmann, and she's going to talk about, do traumatic experiences influence our perception of pain? And Sue has been on all of my series. She's always an amazing resource for helping people break free from pain through her MELT method. And recently she had gone through a separation with her husband, and some things happened and it didn't go well. So she's on this healing journey through grief and loss. And stay tuned for this interview. It's deep, it's in depth. Get a pen and paper ready because you're going to want to take some notes and apply this to your life today. But first, let me share about Sue. She is the creator of the MELT method, a revolutionary self-care system designed to help you get out and stay out of chronic pain, improve your performance, and live a resilient life. And Sue is an internationally recognized educator, manual therapist, exercise physiologist, and founding member of the Fascial Research Society. So stay tuned. This is a loaded interview today, and I hope that you can find a way to implement these, the talks, the ideas, the suggestions in your life. Sue Hitzmann, thank you so much for being here. I had you on a bunch of my last series because you are excellent, amazing. And you're the perfect person to have on this series right now, because when we talked last, you were having challenges with your marriage. And then something really tragic happened.
Yes.
How are you holding up?
I cultivate a practice of contentment. You have to, life is a roller coaster. It's a wave of ebbs and flows, and you just move forward is what you do. You have to be in the now. We have to just live very presently when things like this happen.
So share your story.
So, I think that the reality of it is in challenges, when you're married, you have a connection with somebody that's extremely special. And with my husband, we had a soul connection that's kind of maybe hard for a lot of people to understand, because I just think I'm just really lucky that I ever had the type of love that I had with my husband, and this real spiritual connection with this human being. If somebody knows about twin flames, I kind of feel like twin flames are supposed to meet up in the spirit world, but somehow, sometimes you cross over each other. And from the moment that I ever met Chris, it was like we just kind of both knew there was something that we were supposed to be for each other. I just believe two souls kind of meet on the planet to work out their human experience for spiritual enlightenment. And that's what my husband and I did. And, to share, my husband was 25 years through AA into sobriety, and really wore that like a badge. But I think what we all have to remember is that these types of diseases are a mental health issue that a lot of people, there's a stigma about it. There's nobody wants to talk about it. And certainly when somebody is so many years into recovery, that they're impervious to slipping. And the trouble that I had in my marriage, I always say, actually, we didn't have any trouble in our marriage at all. It was, as a participant of a relationship, when you're observing and noticing something in your partner that isn't right, and you then express what you're reporting, what you see, sometimes the return of the reply is an argument, is a battle, is denial. And a lot of times in recovery is we don't want to ever admit that we might have slipped, because there's shame involved in that. And shame is shadow in the body. And unfortunately, shadow has a voice inside of us. And that's part of the mental health issue that people don't want to talk about. And so my husband and I became victims of a world of medicine, from him taking repeated amounts of antibiotics, repeated opiates, and it changed his microbiomes, it changed his body, it changed his mind, it changed his perception of the world around him, and it suddenly was gray and shadowed, and there was no consulting that, right? It was just a real struggle to be in, and you learn as a participant in a marriage that you have to hold boundaries. And I mean, I knew all about my husband's addiction. He was in fact an active addict. Unless they made a 12-step just for my husband, how we all manage and cope with our own beliefs of the world is, you have to honor that. And I loved him knowing all of that. I mean, we all have our mental health issues, right? We all have our mental health dilemmas. And it's something that is an uncomfortable conversation to have. There's a stigma about it. And it's what ultimately culminated in my husband's death, which has been really a life-changing experience of seeing a beautiful human being, not be able to handle his earthly life. And God said no more and took his angel back. And, he's now in his spirit world where he's able to really do his work, because I can honestly say my husband had a bigger spirit than anybody I've ever met in my whole life. So if anything, I'm, hold gratitude for the fact that he's not suffering anymore, and I get to love him unconditionally until the end of time, which was part of our vow of marriage.
Yep. And you're going through that grieving process. And I think what makes it hard is were you separated? Like you're trying to work it out. And then all of a sudden, what happens?
He was in a show. My husband and I both have very jet-setting lives, and he was in California doing a show. And when he left me for that role, I knew that there was like a high probability that he was just never going to come back, and it just spiraled out of control. And so I lost him when he left. And the rest of the year we were separated. And then he was a block away from me, living in hiding. And the people around us couldn't get him to tell me where he was. And I lost him.
And you've been on this healing journey of grief. And I have watched your evolution, and you're being brave to talk about it, sharing pictures of the two of you. And I could tell that you really did love each other so deeply. And that's amazing. Can you talk to the audience, number one, about what was happening in your body? What happens, because you're the fascial expert, and
Sure.
What happened in your body? How are you picking up the pieces? Because honestly, what is this? Maybe 2 months ago? Maybe?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, September. It was literally not even 2 months ago that he passed away. And yeah, I mean, grief is an emotional wave, is what it is. And grief is a real hard emotion to deal with, because it hurts, but really grief is the expression of how deeply you love. I mean, if you love deeply, you're going to grieve just as hard. And with any relationship, when somebody says to you, like, how do you think this relationship will end? I'm like, definitely in tears. All relationships, if they end, will end in tears, whether it's divorce or it's death or, whatever it is. But there's one scientific fact that is like guaranteed and proven, is 100% of the people that are going to die someday. So being able to deal with grief and what you feel in your body is to allow it to be present, to feel it. And I think that in our life, I've heard people say, well, you just got to move on, right? Just leave it in the past and move on. And I just think that's not how you deal with grief. In fact, what you do is you have to sit with it. You have to feel it. You have to sit very quiet and still with it and listen to what it's saying to you. Because the problem is, when you're in grief, is that you just keep unraveling the past. I wish I had done this. Why didn't he do that? I shoulda, I coulda. But here's the thing about the past is it's gone, it's left, it's there. And you can't change it. But what you can do is change your present state about what happened, and be able to live very presently in the love that you have, or the truth that you have. And I mean, I know the truth. And the truth is, my husband loved me and I loved him. I mean, I would have cut off my arm to save him, but it just wasn't my job to do that. So in my body, when it ached so badly. I mean, I was just hysterical for so many days, right? And I'm a body worker. And so I luckily I have an arsenal of body workers and therapists. And I've helped so many people through grief and trauma over the years. But this time I was having to do it for myself. I had to go back to the books that I've read. I went back to the people that were my sources of understanding this, and to be able to work with it and to find the perfection in the situation. And I think sometimes what helps with grief is sort of realizing that if you take the ownership of it and you say, my gosh, look what I brought into my life, right? Why not me? Like when something terrible happens to you, you say, why me? Why would this happen to you? Why not you? You know, why not me? Why shouldn't this happen to me? And I see people say things like, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. I said, don't feel sorry for me. Bad things happen to good people all the time. And I said this to you earlier, is that, my pain is everyone's pain. My joy is everyone's joy. We have a universal oneness, but you can't really fully grasp oneness until you have separation and you really hold grief in your heart and allow it to move through you. And that's where fascia really does play a role, in where our heart, the frequency of our heart is a frequency that's omitted outside of us. And the fascia is really a link to how our mind and our heart speak to us, and allows us to feel deeply what's happening both in our mind, in our body, and in the world that is around us.
Because grief could be like intense emotional pain, which also manifests as intense physical pain.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's just, it is, before disease actually is diagnosed, before trauma occurs, there's trauma that's happening in what we call the subtle bodies, right? We don't just have a physical body. There's the ethereal body, there's the spiritual body, right? There's a mental body. We have these different aspects of ourselves, and sometimes it's the subtle bodies that have had the trauma far earlier on. And my husband's story, I mean, I know my husband's history. I know where the trauma originated. And, my husband was an actor, and he was very good at showing the world what he wanted them. He was a good master manipulator of how he allowed himself to be perceived by the world. But the one person he couldn't get past truth with was me. I mean, I could see right through him, which is why we had such an inherent bond, as I had his trust, as we were he used to call us the Bohemian power couple of the Upper West Side. We had a bond that was in truth. And, like I say, I mean, just sometimes the subtle body's wounds are so big because they're so rooted in karma from our childhood, from before we were born, from our families, that we don't really think about those things because, people don't understand quantum physics. They don't understand that, what you're perceiving isn't even real, in a sense. Reality is what we make it, but it might not be actually what's going on at all. And so again, sometimes our mind is just not a reliable tool to measure what's really going on outside of us. Sometimes those voices in our head are telling us things that are one thing, but it might not be so. And that's a hard thing for people to realize that's going on, but it's what shapes us and allows us to live on this planet, is feeling the emotions and allowing them to not consume us. And unfortunately, when we suppress grief and we suppress shame, right? I love Brene Brown, right? And she says people kind of sometimes mix grief or shame and guilt. And the difference between the two is guilt is I've done something bad. Shame is I am bad. And when shame festers in the body, it it's like a shadow, and it grows in there, and it wants to be suppressed. It wants to be pushed down. But if we keep pushing it, it's like a volcano. At some point, it's going to erupt. And when it does, it can manifest itself into abuse of one's body, into mental health instability, into the waves of even, what's clinically called bipolar disorder, which, we should probably redefine that. But it comes down to altering our mind's reality of what's going on in our bodies.
Wow. And I do want to talk about that because we both work with fascia and we've both seen amazing things. And I honestly think it's really the number one treatment for pain. Obviously getting your lifestyle looked at, what is your relationship like, healing inside, but so much is our body. Our nervous system is here underneath our skin, and our fascial system is interwoven throughout. So let's talk about the quantum physics. It's a challenging topic. You've been involved with the Fascial Congress, Research Congress. Talk about what you've read about quantum physics, the fascia storing emotions. It's a system.
It is.
In our body. It's a highway of information being traveled through.
It is. So first of all, connective tissue is primarily made up of collagen, and collagen is like a superconductor. It has an electromagnetic frequency to it. And the fluids of fascia, the interstitial fluids, are very inherently linked to the frequencies and vibrations of those things around us. So in fact, we think of the mind as being separate, right? And like in the times of Descartes and in the 1500s, like when, dissection wasn't available, right? Because the church said, we're all oneness. And they said, oh, no, actually the brain, the soul and the spirit is one thing. The body's just this other part. So the mind and the body are separate, but in fact they are one. Fascia is the grid. It is the glue that holds everything together, but it is a fascial net, this collagenous fluid-based system that supports, protects, and surrounds everything. And the way that we move, the way that we think is going to alter our own biomechanics, and that can then relay itself into a state of fascial stiffening. And when fascia becomes stiffened, that can then cause signaling to the brain that something's wrong in the body. And so an emotional trauma can very much become a physical pain because the free nerve endings that live in fascia are sending messages to the brain saying, something's wrong down here. I don't know what it is. And if the brain gets those messages and says, I'm not sure what that is, pain is going to be sent as a message to basically just get your attention to take action. I mean, that's really initially what pain is our brain's only way to say something's wrong. And the problem is that the glia are another type of cell in the body, and the majority of your brain cells are glia, but glia is also part of the fascial system. So when it comes to that quantum physics of frequency, it's all connected. So our emotional body is the fascial body. The emotional system is the fascial system. It's not just in your brain, the way that the limbic system and the hypothalamus and the thalamus react and respond to frequency and information coming from the body to the brain is what's going to either allow us to manage trauma and say, my gosh, I'm really having the feeling about this. What is my body trying to tell me? Or we go the other way and we say, I'm not paying attention to you. I'm ignoring you. I don't want to hear you. What's wrong with you? And we pop a pill to inhibit the response. And this is how the vicious cycle begins, because I think, again, if you really think about it, dysfunction, disease starts in the subtle bodies before it becomes and manifests itself into the physical form. And that's really where the beauty of understanding, again, how our emotions can actually cause physical trauma to exist in our bodies. And then if you go to a doctor to try to figure that out, they're just going to look at the physical body or give you a pain med to alter your brain's response to what's going on. And you're down the rabbit hole of dysfunction. And
that's why MRIs are not necessarily diagnosing your problem and your pain. And I want you to think of it as a situation when you're hands-on with somebody. I'm going to share my story as I got into this after a rollover car accident, woke up from a coma. I don't remember anything. And as soon as my diaphragm was released from the seatbelt strangling me, the seatbelt strangled me and snapped my spine. It crushed my vertebrae. And when they put their hands on me, that therapist with myofascial release, I had all this fear released. It was terror, as if the accident was still happening. And today, when I do have my hands on people, I can tell when they're in their body. I can tell when they're in their head and in fear and worry. Their texture of their tissue changes. And this
Yes.
is exactly what you're talking about. This is why this is my #1 treatment for pain and emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's really an important thing. And, you're saying that in such a way, where we have a hard time, a lot of people have a hard time perceiving that their emotions could be causing their back pain. They're like, no, it's just because I'm sitting too long. And I'm like, okay, if you want.
That's part of it. That's part of it. But if you're clenching your jaw, and you can even feel, clench your jaw, you can feel the pull down to your pelvis.
Yeah, I love how Gil Hadley, who I do all of the dissections with for many years, he always talks about it like peeling the layers of an onion. And sometimes you peel a layer away, and you've actually peeled 15 layers and you don't even know it, because the thin layers, the layers between the definable layers, are so thin and so fine and so delicate that we miss those. But again, that's where current travels. I mean, truly, current is traveling through the fascial net and allowing us to breathe freely, to move energy through us. And sometimes, we get stuck. And I think that there's a time where, especially when it comes to emotional trauma, physical trauma, abuse, addiction, mental health issues, we feel we're all by ourselves. Nobody's understanding me. And in fact, if people find out that I have this shame and grief, they won't love me anymore. I'll lose the love. And then it's just, shame is it's like a devil that lives inside that's saying, oh, you don't need them. You got this. Don't worry. And that's what it does, is it hides itself and it pulls the person into this darkness. And actually, you can get out of that darkness, and it takes 3 things. It takes speaking. You have to speak about it. You have to lose the fear. And that's a hard thing, right? You have to lose the fear and speak about the shame. You need to connect. You need to own and connect with other people, and you need to go into your body to sense what you feel. And that's very scary when all you want to do is tune it out, get out, break free of it. But the only way to heal is to go in your body and sense what you feel. And that's why also I think Melt is so powerful for people, because that's what we're doing, is inviting people to sense their subtle bodies, the subtle aspects that are not muscles and bones and all the stuff that, we define in anatomy, but this deeper sense of us, this frequency that we feel, that we're all sharing. I said it to you, my pain is everybody's pain. My joy is everyone's joy. We've all experienced pain. We've all experienced pleasure. We've all experienced happiness and joy. But joy is a choice in some ways, to find joy, even when trauma strikes, even when these horrible things happen to good people all of the time. But I think that when you understand that, and you trust in the process, you trust in what the universe is giving you, and you somehow accept your judgments and your thoughts, and you love yourself anyway, and you accept peace, you choose peace, you choose joy as being the thing to consistently come back to, and to say, I need to find the perfection even in loss. So would I want my husband back? Yes. Would I have wanted this to go different? Yes. But I wouldn't want him here if he was still suffering. And my husband was suffering, and he couldn't find his way out, no matter, I was kicking and screaming, and it just couldn't. I couldn't break him free of it, because it's in him. He needed to do that work. And if you're vulnerable, and you're so vulnerable in a body, it's hard to believe that anyone can help you, and you talk yourself into depression.
Right. And that's what we're talking about here, is the hidden traumas. The hidden traumas of life experiences that happen, that do get stuck in that subtle body. I've experienced it myself. My patients have. That's why I blend the somatic work with getting the nervous system regulated to feel safe, and the hands-on work, because it is so deep in there.
That's it. It's unresolved trauma that actually lives in all of us. That's an important thing to remember, that we have a lot of unresolved trauma because we're not taught to deal with grief. And what we also don't realize is oftentimes when a traumatic event happens or we feel like something is being done to us, right? We never consider that maybe it's being done for us. Maybe there's something that your spiritual body needs to experience so that you can have spiritual enlightenment. You know, we all want our lives to always be perfect, but I said it's true, right? You know whose life is like this, who's always happy? Dead people. Dead people's lives go like this. The human experience, the heartbeat is an up and down. And that is, again, like this concept of bipolar. What does that mean? It just means two opposite ends of feelings. And we all have that. It's just that if we let it spiral out of control and we don't allow ourselves to feel it, the highs are so high, it's unmanageable, and the lows are so low, you feel like dying. And that's a big thing, is that we like, again, I just think we need to break the stigma. And that's why, you know, talking to you is like so important. And I hope people are listening to that, saying you're really never alone, even in the worst of times. So if you can even see that, you know, my husband dying is in fact a gift to me. It's hard to realize, right? And because you can't really think about it up here, but I'm a different person now than I was before. I'm writing things differently. I'm seeing the world differently. And sometimes maybe that's why these things happen, is to wake us up and continue the journey, because that's what our souls needed. He finished his job. Maybe his job was to fall in love and feel deeply and have that moment. And once he had that, his body expired.
Beautiful. And what I've been working on lately is when these challenging, really hard times come, I'm just trusting and accepting and saying, okay, this is my teacher. This is going to teach me something. And when I heard the news about your husband, my heart went out for you. And I reached out to you and I said, you know, I don't know if you're ready yet, but do you want to do this interview? And you're like, oh yeah, I need to talk about this. I want to get it out there.
Yeah, that pink elephant in the room. Nobody wants to say the word. I'm going to say it. Mental health issue. We need to talk about it. Addiction is a mental health issue. Bipolar disorder, it's a mental health issue. What is it to have mental health, okay? When you're clear, right? When you're clear, when you can observe and not react, when you are effortlessly making decisions that are rational and you can see reality and see it in a joyful way, when you're unclear, when you're struggling with clarity, that's a mental health issue. So alcoholism, addiction, abuse, schizophrenia, it doesn't matter what you want to call it, right? We've got to break the stigma of it. We all have imbalances in our mental well-being. Our mental well-being is challenged. It's like a muscle. You have to exercise it. So really, again, you can't understand oneness unless you have separation. Duality, right? You have to have duality to understand oneness. And it's a hard lesson to have, but I think if you think you're going to get through the human experience and never feel grief and never feel shame and never feel pain, it's impossible. But if you can allow yourself to feel it and then allow it to not kill you, crush you, actually you create spiritual enlightenment. And that's something that we're not taught. I think in schools it would be great if we actually taught kids, you know, like if somebody said, you know, that was stupid. No, I'm not stupid, right? I might have made a stupid decision, but I'm not stupid, right? Just sometimes you make a bad choice, but that doesn't make me bad. Right? So it's how we communicate. And I think, again, what people don't realize is oftentimes what's happening in the physical state and how you're reacting has nothing to do with the present state. It has to do with a memory that you had in the past, that when in this moment it's happening, you're not even realizing you're reacting because of something that happened to you in the past. And that's a hard part of psychology to start to catch and exercise when somebody's saying something to you and you're feeling like you're being robbed. You're in what they call gaslighting. Somebody's pointing a finger back at you, they're taking, and you're sitting there, well, you this and you that. But actually, if you don't react and you just listen and you realize I'm being attacked, and I'm having a feeling about this, and you know why I'm having a feeling about it is because in the past when my father did that to me, I was annihilated. And God forbid I spoke up and fought for myself, because if I did, I would have been massacred, right? So you learn to ignore, you learn to not say because you don't want to get into confrontation. But that's why people like Chris, for me, come into our world, is to do it different, is to not, be a willow and willow down, but to stand, learn boundaries and say, hey, I'm observing this, I'm going to say it to you. That's new for me, right? So I learned that with my husband, and he didn't marry me because I was some sort of a sissy who was just going to let him get away with things and railroad me. He married me because I was pushing his own karmic understanding of himself. And he did the same for me. And again, I think we need to realize that we bring energy into our world to grow. In every way, it's to grow. And if you just keep repeating, what is it? If you're looking for a different result, doing the exact same thing over and over again, like that's insanity, right? It's a very form of insanity, is thinking like you're going to make a new outcome out of doing the same thing. So it's our job to start to catch our patterns, start to catch how we're reacting, and try to figure out what it was in our past that is making us feel this way, and then maybe learning to do something different.
See, look how complex you are. This is like you are taking this traumatic event, and I just see this huge life force in you.
Thank you.
The fascial system, it is almost like a hologram underneath, and those trapped memories, whether it's falls, getting hit in the face by a baseball, and that protection, it starts to add up. And that's what I do want to talk about, because when I'm working with someone, say, and they come to me for jaw pain, and we're working together, and all of a sudden there's a vision of her mother who used to abuse her, punching her.
Yes.
That comes out on the table. So let's talk about how early traumas can cause pain in adulthood too.
Yes, that's it. Is when something happens to you, they call that a somato-emotional release, right? What is somato? It means body. Emotional, the body's emotion releases. So the thing is, we think we keep all of our emotions in our mind. So even when we talk about mental health, is it just a brain thing? I don't think so. I think it's a body thing, sending messages to the brain. And so when we have a traumatic experience when we're younger, how we're reacting to the first time to a traumatic event and sometimes trauma is constant, like if you're in an abusive family, right? It's a bleed out every day, whereas some people, like they watch their mother die of a heart attack in front of them. That's going to cause traumatic experiences. But what we do is we pull it into the body. The fascia, and it again is the energy body that says, come here and let me hold you and let me keep your mind safe so that you can continue. But in that, it can get trapped in our bodies. And what I think fascia does is it holds it for a time. But by the time you're 30, I think that there's kind of a natural unweaving of those memories that does start to creep out, because now we're adults and we want to be in love, we want to have a career, we want to grow, and now you're more consciously enlightened of your choices. You're not living under your family's law, you're inventing yourself, you're becoming who you feel you want to be, and that's when those memories start to come out, and sometimes unannounced, right? But I think that there's a part of the fascia that is intuitive, where when it knows you're in a place where you can actually process it as a clear thinking person, it's going to pull itself out of you. And that's sometimes why you suddenly find yourself on a therapist's table without even knowing that that's going to happen. But that's the piece of it, is that we somehow, I always say, if somebody gets on my table, it's not by chance. Like the whole world brought itself to this one moment for you and I to connect, to try to find an understanding and a new way of living. Right? And that's a real beautiful thing when you get to share that energy. And that's really the beauty of body work, is that you're sharing energy, you're blending energy, you're taking a clear channel, and you're giving an opportunity for someone to move their energy through themselves when they can't do it themselves. And it takes people. I think if I didn't have my friend Kara when I was going through this whole trauma initially, and some of the people that have come to me, it has been so uplifting. And I told you, a very vulnerable thing that I've never done is on my personal page, right? That only had 500 people on it, right? Because, like I never really posted on my personal page, because who wants to know about my personal life? But I took that risk, and for the first time, I'm using social media to connect with people. And what is unbelievable is realizing how many people love me, how many people are supportive of me, and how many people have experienced the same thing and feel for me, feel the pain. Because again, our frequency of shame, grief, pain, it's all the same. We all go through it. And so together is how you break free from it consuming you. And again, the fascia moving through that subtle body, feeling and sensing what going into your body and sensing what you feel without touch, without judgment, without movement, without vision. What is that sixth sense is the fascial frequency. And when you tap into that, it can be absolutely transformative. Absolutely transformative.
I'm there with you. So if you're watching, find a fascial therapist, reach out to us. It works. I mean, people leave feeling they often say, I'm tired. And I say, no, you're just out of that sympathetic fight or flight.
Yes, and give into the tired, because that's where the parasympathetic, the healing, rest, and repair is happening. So yeah, after a bodywork session, sometimes some people are like, wow, I suddenly feel so joyous. And some people are like, I need to take a nap. I said, that's it, is we change the frequency, right? It's kind of like a radio, right? You're just changing the frequency, you're changing you're just tuning it. And I also use things like tuning forks, right? And we have different vibrations and frequencies in us. And so even, if you're really feeling sad, I know this sounds crazy, but have you ever just sat there and hummed? Right? Or listen to music and feel the vibration through your body can really be very spiritually healing. Sound is an incredible way, light therapy, sound therapy, touch therapy. Again, we have mental therapy, right? It's not that we're trying to diss a mental therapist, because that's helpful also. But if all you're doing is just the mind piece of it, you're missing big elements of it. And something you also said before is that, like on an MRI, you can't see things. But one of the really amazing things are the fMRIs that are out now. And also people like Dr. Amen, who's doing the brain scans and really seeing how regions of the brain light up when trauma happens, and how people who have addictions or have a mental health issue, the areas that are commonly known, they had 80,000 some odd brain scans. And people who have those kind of traumas, it's like a vacant area. It's not being stimulated. And so why is that? And can we change the mind's perspective of what's going on with us? It's almost like we have three bodies, right? We have the thinking self, the mind, and our here. We have this physical body where we're feeling things. And then we also have the body that's sort of, pragmatic. It's taking in information from the outside world. And so, sometimes those three minds are in conflict with one another. Some of them are actually, reacting to things when the other one should be reacting. And so, again, the mind is an unreliable tool for how we're really feeling or perceiving the world around us. I think that's the piece of it that's kind of, people don't talk about it, but it's happening. Haven't you ever had a gut feeling over something and then you don't do it and you're like, I knew it. I knew it. I was saying that all along. Yeah. And you think, oh, well, there it is. So trust your gut. Trust you. The day you go away from your instincts and what you're feeling is when you bury emotions. And we need to feel emotions and not think that it's going to attack or kill other people. And that, I think, is, again, a reason that a lot of us don't show our sorrow or don't show our anger, because, like, I mean, I was in a family where if I was frustrated, if I was sad, my dad would be like, go to your room. I don't want to see that. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you weren't supposed to show your sadness. You weren't supposed to show your anger. And so you suppress it. And as an adult, you don't need to have somebody tell you to go into your room. Your mind does it for you. That you've locked yourself back into your bedroom, or it sent you there. And now you're speaking from a place where you're screaming in a pillow like you were when you were a kid. And again, that's where that emotion passed to current. So it's coming back to the now. That's an important concept that people need to learn more about, is being very present with your feelings and recognizing when you're living in the past, because you can't fix that. It is what it is. You can only learn from it and stay present, and don't look too far out into the future, because that's when you'll miss the beauty even in the bad times.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been discovering lately as I do intensives now. And I added the somatic experiencing because, like you said, the talk therapy, it is helpful. It's a good co-regulator. Get things off your chest. But you know those clients who come to the office and they're laying on the table, their eyes are just staring up at the ceiling. Their head is so busy. Sometimes it takes almost 40 minutes of the session just to be in their body. Mm-hmm. So now when I blend the inner work and the awarenesses and getting in touch with those body sensations, they're starting to take it out. We clear their fascial system up, and we'll talk about your amazing tools to do that. It makes the body almost like an antenna to identify those things that are good for you and not. It can increase your intuition. So when people work with me, they get clear in their vessel, just like we're born as a beautiful child without all this trauma. And then they can learn with the external things that are triggering them, making them clench, tighten up. If that relationship is bad, or every time I say yes to my daughter and I'm overdoing for her, I'm starting to get headaches and shoulder pain. And it's this, our body is an antenna.
It is an antenna. And again, the fascia is an antenna. I mean, we take for granted all the stuff that we take in as incoming information from our common senses, but the fascia is actually taking information in from far beyond our bodies. That is kind of a hard thing to wrap our mind around, but you're right, it is happening that way.
And I wish, like I said, I know we have Guillaume Berthaud who's doing more video on what the fascial system looks like. I've got a piece of, saran wrap that I talk about. Is just, but when you have these emotional traumas, they just get locked.
Yeah, so this is just, like a piece of mesh, right? And so same thing is that the fascia isn't just like a wrapper around muscle. It's actually interwoven, and there's many, many, many layers of it, right? So you're right. If you pull on one area of it, or something gets, just how you're saying, right? You kind of pull on one spot and the whole tissue is going to start to crimp and move. And that's what they call tensegrity, right? Is tensegrity is a system that has, what we would maybe consider discontinuous parts, like our bones, right? They're floating, bones are floating in a continuous collagenous matrix, which is really what's holding it together.
So while you have that model out, can we talk about, and show as a visual, of why maybe you have tight shoulder pain, shoulder pain up here, and sometimes this is tight here. We have to release this to treat that. So it's not about treating the symptom of the shoulder pain. It's probably coming from somewhere else. And I find there's a trapped emotion, and maybe you were a little girl and you fell out of a tree and you jammed your shoulder, and that clenching is still there. No one was there to catch you off the ground when you fell. And that's an emotional trauma, and that can get trapped into that netting.
Yes, exactly right. And again, it's how you reacted when you fell. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I fell out of a tree and I broke my ankle, and I looked at my leg and it was like completely crooked. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get into so much trouble. That was my first thought. I'm going to get into so much trouble because I broke my ankle. Right? Why would a kid think that? Is because like, well, you shouldn't have been climbing a tree, you shouldn't have this, shouldn't have that. So, you get a cast on and whatever.
Brush it off though, because you have to figure out how to get home so you don't get in trouble. So
Right.
don't process the fall.
Exactly. Yeah, and that trauma gets pulled into you, and I mean, my story of that goes into all of this other interweaving of how who was it that pulled me out of the creek, and the big woven story of how that all happened was something that when I did body work and I worked with a therapist and she unwound that tissue, like how you say it, you relive that moment and you don't realize, like, my gosh, I almost feel like it just happened a second ago. It all pops right back into your mind. And that's powerful. It's bigger than just talking about stuff. And sometimes that's what happens with just talk therapy, is that you just talk about it. And so you actually make it bigger in your mind, but you don't then say, now, how can we think of this different, or why are we talking about this? How can we reshape this? How can we change our mind about our body's experience? But with body work, you can. And that's where these two are very complementary, is being able to have a safe space to talk about it and to recognize that our bodies are just gagging for us to be involved in the process of its ability to protect, support, and stabilize us. That's what it wants. It wants our participation. We're just not taught how to do it. And again, that's why I think you and I are here in so many of our cohorts in this industry, is to say you can. Yes, you can control your body. You can actually be more a participant in your life's experience and your life's journey. And that's why when trauma happens, it won't destroy you. I mean, really what's happened to me and how the family has dealt with this and what people perceive on the outside world, right? They're seeing something in the outside world, but they have no idea what was going on inside my home. They have no idea. And they're like, well, I don't believe about anything. He told me this. And I'm like, well, he was kind of out of his mind, but why wouldn't he say that? He was trying to make you love him because he was so afraid that if you knew what he was really doing, that you would all try to help support him, but he didn't want the help because he couldn't help himself. And now, again, trauma. But that's not our job to change someone. We are the ones that have to want to heal and know that healing is available, even in the worst of things. Again, why do somebody will say, well, I can't find a good reason why my mom died. And I was like, maybe there's a story about that about you, and like, how have your relationships been with women? Terrible. Let's talk about that. I wonder if maybe there's a correlation there. So that's it, I just think we need to realize that the beauty of life is the waves, is the things that come to us for the great learning, for spiritual enlightenment. And if you can realize that everything is just frequency and it's all spiritual, all of it, we just are so hell-bent in the physical health of ourselves. And when the physical health goes wrong, we're out at the gym, we're changing our diet, we're trying something. But again, are we really understanding that mental health is a part of the physical body, is why we think we look terrible, or why we're eating the foods we're eating, why we feel the way we feel. And it just needs to be a conversation. You need to get these things into the light. Otherwise they fester. And you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Isn't that the coin, right? You have nothing to fear but fear itself. And in fact, if you can find the joy, even in the bad situations in life, you really will be able to manage even the worst of things that could happen. So, the gal who I work with, who's a spiritual healer, she goes, you got to chug that shit down sometimes. You just got to drink it down and say, bring it on, bring it on, universe. If that's what I'm here to learn, I'm not going to sit here and question it. I'm just going to acknowledge that it's here, and I'm going to see the bigger picture of it. And again, that's why body work is so critical, I think, is to realize that you're not alone in this, that it's everyone's pain. It's everyone's joy. It's everyone's happiness. It's everyone's life.
Beautiful. And I want to share, bringing you back to your little girl who fell out of the tree, your little girl self. And what I've been doing, it's absolutely incredibly amazing, is using the trauma work to help renegotiate the trauma. So like for you that day, it's what was going on in that day, and that you felt shame that you were going to get in trouble. But what if we could go back together, me as your therapist, co-regulating with you, that you're safe. Yes, honey, you fell out of that tree. And instead of worrying about getting in trouble, you and I work in this beautiful present day moment with my hands on your body to literally unravel the fascia. So if I were there with you and we go in and we rewind that moment and we renegotiate the trauma, let it happen in a more ideal way, that you knew you didn't get in trouble. I'm your mother. We're right there. We hold you. Oh, you're okay, honey. We all make mistakes. Mm-hmm. That would have changed the course of everything that day, and probably your healing. So that's what I do now in my treatments, is we look at those traumas and we renegotiate them. And the body in present day experiences it differently. Even say for a woman who has a C-section scar and she wanted so badly to have that first baby naturally and it didn't happen. So I take her through that as if she really did deliver the baby. We're doing pelvic floor work, etc. And everything just unravels. It's amazing. And I want people to know about this because this is the healthcare of the future and it's not being talked about enough.
That is right. It really is. And it, again, I think that people need to understand things of the subtle body. And that's part of the work that we do, is realizing, like, again, emotions are real things. Physical ideas are one thing, but emotions are so big that really understanding how to acknowledge them, how to acknowledge the feelings, how to go back in time and recreate a story for ourselves to get a new message, almost like we're rewriting the DNA, we're programming it, because fascia is inherently linked to our DNA. I mean, you can alter your DNA through the fascial tissue. And sometimes I think we just need to get really quiet and go in and find that inner child and just say those words: I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, I'm sorry I have been gone so long, but now that I'm back, I promise I'll stay. And really transformation can occur. That's what it's here for, is transformation.
Well, let's talk about dissociation and how it leads to mental fatigue, and also causing your ability you can't really cope with the pain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what we do. Again, we do disassociate but that's a coping mechanism. That's just coping. But again, could we cope differently? Could we cope by feeling it? Right? Instead of disassociating and go, oh, that's over there, or I can't deal with that, or it's, I just got to move through it. I got to move on, right? There's no moving on. You're moving through it, right? You can't move on from it. You have to realize that these things are not being done to you. In fact, in the universal frequency, it's done for us. It's done for our spiritual enlightenment. I know that sounds a little, up there in an idea, but I'm telling you, we're souls and spiritual bodies brought down to this earth to create a human experience, to work out some learning and some lessons and forgiveness and love and joy, all these things, so that we have spiritual enlightenment, so that we can learn and move forward. And I think that that's a big piece of it, is you can't disassociate from feelings. It's actually impossible. And when we do, it hurts us.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to our first interview together. I think it was the Pain Treatments That Work series about 3 years ago, and you are just completely transformed. You are such a different person now.
I think so too. I mean, I said it. I was like, I think that there's like this moment, like, when I think, why would this happen to me? I think, why not happen to me? And why did it happen right now? I have no freaking idea, because I can't rationalize what happened, because it just makes no sense, right? It's crazy that happened. This beautiful being, this freaking spirit, like, I've never met anybody like my husband. He was an earth angel. He healed me, and he's going to continue to heal me and be my spiritual teacher, because he is my spiritual teacher when he was here on the planet. And now that he's gone, I see just how God put a spiritual being in front of me for my benefit, and he gave me to him because he just needed this one. Whatever we worked out before we came down here, our souls needed to meet, and here we did. And We became better people because of it. I mean, it's sad that he's gone, but it doesn't take his spirit or his light away. He's always with me now. And I can love him unconditionally as I did when he was on the planet. And now I can even love him more. And yeah, I just love him.
Your search for meaning too, and you're putting your meaning in. And I like that you're not taking victim to this. You're really being empowered and growing from it. And really, you're reshaping your whole being. I can see it.
Yeah, it wasn't done to me. It's done for me. It changes the language, you know. There's so many ways. I think the word forgiveness is another one, right? Is that we have a hard time understanding what forgiveness is because we think it's like bygones will be bygones and put it in the past. But, you know, if you've ever heard of Colin Tipping and radical forgiveness and understanding that we aren't really taught how to forgive. But when you learn forgiveness in a deeper way and give it deeper meaning, and again, find the perfection in everything, say, look what I've brought into my life, you become not a victim. You become empowered to say, I brought Christopher here. My energy needed Chris Whalen, and Chris Whalen found me, and he changed my life, and I'm a better person because of him. And in loss, you can be strong in loss too.
Well, I want to rewind a bit to Sue, the fascial expert, the MELT method creator, and share, because honestly, with PTSD, with stress, anxiety, depression, there's no other better way than self-care and self-touch, or getting treated. So talk about the MELT method, and maybe you have some samples people can see, because I know you have a great...
Yes, I mean, I have 2 books. I mean, like, these are my books that I have, and actually the rollers are in the other room. I can show you one, but you know, what we essentially do is, just like a manual therapist like you and I, you know, we do light touch therapeutic intervention. And the idea is to work on the subtle body, to actually work with the fluid components of fascia, rather than like in myofascia, they're working on the muscle bellies, they're working on blood flow. This is really about the subtle body. And really one of the beauties of MELT, there's a sequence called the rebalance sequence. And whether you're doing mindful, if you think of it as mindful-based practice of self-care. So we use softballs and rollers to help restore the fluid body, to help restore the movement of the frequency in the fascial tissue. And one of the autonomic functions of our body, you know, there's a lot of 98% of what's happening in our body is like involuntary, but there's one involuntary component that we can all tap into, and that's the breath. And in the rebalance sequence, we have this thing called the 3D breath breakdown. And the whole component of it, and anyone can do this to themselves, is to slow down the inhalation and focus on breathing in a direction. And the secret of mindful-based practice when you're using the breath is catching those moments where your mind wanders into the email, the social media, the picking up the child, the whatever the chatter is. And like when you do meditation, people get really frustrated. It's like, I can't think of, my brain wanders in the first 2 breaths. I said, this is where transformation can happen, is when you catch your mind wandering and you bring it back to the breath. And in the moment where you catch it and you bring it back, that's where mindfulness begins. And you might have to do that 20 times after you're taking 4 breaths in each direction. You might find that you have to keep thinking and keep your mind on that breathing. But that, again, is the practice of mindful meditation. And over time, you'll find that you can get through an entire rebalance sequence and be fully focused and present in the present moment of your breath, in the present moment of your feelings, in the present moment of your sensations. And it can completely transform your body. Just doing a 10-minute sequence like that is really powerful. The foot treatment was really important for me in those first few days when Chris died. Seeing your husband get pulled out of an apartment in a body bag is just something my mind will never forget that moment. It's imprinted somewhere in my brain. I can't erase it. So instead, what I do when I feel it is I ground myself. And the foot treatment was so helpful for me to just allow myself to be re-earthed. Put myself back in. I went to the beach, right? I had to go to the ocean. I had to throw myself into the ocean and just let it pull the sorrow out of me, right? So these are not metaphors. These are real physical manifestations of transformation. And so that really, people see the roller and they think, oh, it's foam rolling. And I'm like, melt is a very mindful based practice. It's really working on the subtle body. It's getting people to tune into sensations. And that's not for, everybody could do it, but it takes practice. It's a discipline. And we have to realize that tapping into the subtle body is not, it's a practice. It's not something that's intuitive. You have to practice it to learn how to do it. But it's a wonderful thing when you start doing self-care and you touch yourself in a very gentle, loving way, how much that changes and quells some of the chatter in the mind. It's a beautiful experience to do it. And so I think what's been a blessing for me is, as a practitioner, having people come to my practice and feeling transformation and giving them a tool that they can go home and continue that same mindful based practice and realize that, our bodies are designed to heal. And so if you can tap into that healing component of your body, it's so powerful. I mean, it's really an incredible thing to watch people transform right before your eyes. And it can really change your mind about your body.
It is beautifully said. And this, I work with people, helping co-regulate them and get them more independent with self-regulation. So these foam rollers and the balls, the tools, are great self-regulators. They're so much better than reaching for that bottle of wine or checking out doing those addictive behaviors. But it really does, and it might not always be so super comfortable at first, but if you stick with it, even like just 10 minutes a day, there's just such transformation.
Well, that's a great thing, is that is exactly what it is to learn to self-regulate, right? We all just think like we've got our stuff together, right?
No, we all have our vices. So, but the foam roller has gotten me through many challenging times.
Me too. It really is learning that we can soothe ourselves. We can self-regulate. And those moments where something is sensitive, actually it's same thing as the breathing. It's in those moments where you're like, wow, I'm really feeling something. Could I change the way that feels by going in more slowly and more gently, right? There's mindful-based practice. There's self-regulation, is that I can allow my body to feel something different in a moment when it was intense. I can actually bring it to less intensity. And that's where you change your mind's idea about what's going on in the body. And again, that's where transformation is. It's in your body. You have a healing body. That's what it's here to do. And if we practice and train it and give it some strength, we can conquer even sorrow and grief and shame and nip it in the bud so that we can live a joyous life even when trauma exists.
Absolutely. And that no pain, no gain. Some people think you've got to dig elbows in. You have to beat me up. But the reality is you don't have to. If you need elbows in to be beaten up, chances are you're really dissociated and you're not feeling enough. So you need the help to go in.
Well, and they're the words is, I'm not feeling enough. And sit with that for a second. If you feel like you need to hurt yourself, take a half step back and say, why is it that I need to hurt myself to feel? What does that mean? And again, that's where transformation, that's where self-regulation, that's where subtle body transformation happens.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you being so open and sharing. I hope that, getting this out for the first time live like this is a part of your healing journey. So thank you for being here and doing this. And just tell people about your pain bundle and your discount that you're offering, because
yes, we have, what did we say? It was 10
off pain is your discount.
10 off pain. Yeah. And if you go to the Melt Method website, you get 10% off of any bundle. I'm pretty active on social media on the Melt Method page. I oftentimes just do a little melt sequence. We also have Melt on Demand so that you can learn how to do it. And every week I put out a new video. So just remember, in self-care, you're really never by yourself. You always have resources, and yeah, we're here to help you.
And really take the information in this interview, and a lot of it might be new for you, but the reality is, Sue and I can both tell you it works. It really, really does. So investigate, reach out, and learn this method, because it will change your life. It changed mine, and thank you for bringing this to the world, Sue.
Thanks so much for being a part of my journey, Phaedra. It's really, really a privilege to know you. I appreciate you very much. So thank you. Very grateful.
Stop this, and I just can't wait to see who you become even further down the road with this, because I'm waiting for the next one.
Buckle in.
You've got this, strong woman. All right. Well, that was amazing and a great interview for me. I know, I hope for you. It was probably a lot of new thoughts and concepts for you. But for gosh, 20 years now, I've been a therapist working with individuals, and I see how trauma can get trapped in the body. So it was a pleasure to talk with Sue Hitzmann here today and really get to the heart of how she's coping with such grief and loss and working through her pain as she teaches the world to honor your body and have good practice of self-care. And again, this interview is loaded. We're just getting started. There's so many great interviews to help inspire you to recharge your life, that in any moment you can pause and you can start fresh again. And if you love this interview series, consider purchasing, and you'll get a lot of great bonuses, including, lifetime access to this series so you can listen to it at any time when you're struggling. It also includes 5 days journey into mapping trauma in your body. And also, if you like what you heard today, you want to learn more, I would suggest you purchase a series so you can have a one-on-one session with me. And I can answer any of those questions, help guide you deeper into your body so you can get clear, so your body's antenna is perceiving better into the world. So thank you for watching today and being open to this information as it's being presented to you. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week.